Given the current landscape, the Capital One Savor and the Venture X might be one of the best 2-card setups out there. Today we'll run through why I like it, how the setup works, some disadvantages, but why it feels like a fair compromise. Big favor though before we dive in is to give this a thumbs up to help with the algorithm. If you know someone that might benefit, then share this with them. Starting with the landscape, a lot of the draw is what it's not. Unlike competitor cards, you're not dealing with a ton of credits. They do exist, but it's still around travel and it makes sense. If you live in a major city, you use rideshare, you go to a bunch of events, eat out at nice restaurants, and stay at fancy hotels anyways, then those competitor cards might make sense, but definitely not for everyone. So that's bucket number one. Bucket number two involves using tech that somehow feels like it's from the 90s and would still involve you having 100k in assets with them. They also don't have transfer partners, which limits the upside and makes it non-viable. Bucket 3 are banks with more questionable histories. Bucket 4 might make sense, but currently lack any lounge access. The Capital One Duel is simple, doesn't have much hoop jumping, and you have upside, making it a pretty good 1-2 punch. Okay, so what are the cards and how do they work? The first one is the Capital One Savor. This is your no annual fee everyday earner card. You get 3% cash back in grocery stores, dining, entertainment, and popular streaming. Streaming includes a lot of the big ones, but also subject to change. Note that for grocery stores, it does not include superstores like Walmart or Target, which are different merchant codes. Outside of these, you do have some different levers. For example, 8% back on Capital One Entertainment. There are exclusions, but generally fine, so for example, pre-sales do not count for this. You also get 5% cash back on hotels and rental cars through Capital One Travel. Also 1% back on everything else. Even if you are running other setups, it's still a pretty compelling card by itself, given that it's no annual fee and has pretty good multipliers. Looking at reviews on their site, one complaint is that it's just cash back and that people would rather get miles for travel. That's actually where the Capital One Venture X comes in. Capital One lets you convert cash back that you earn into Capital One miles. It is a one-way street, but it can supercharge everything. The Venture X has a $3.95 annual fee, and it's going to be your travel and everything else card. So for example, you get 10x miles on hotels and rental cars booked through Capital One Travel, 5x miles on flights and vacation rentals booked through Capital One Travel, and then 2x on everything else. If the annual fee scares you, you do have a bit of help. You get up to $300 in annual credit for bookings through Capital One Travel. You get this every year. You also get 10,000 bonus miles worth at least 100 towards travel every year, starting on your first anniversary. So after year 1, after year 2, and so on. In year 1, the intro bonus does the heavy lifting. Long term though, looking at the face value of these benefits, you pretty much break even and technically come out ahead. Even if you were pedantic though and decide to discount the credits by let's say 10, 20, or 30%, it can still make sense given the other perks you get with the card. Let's say you're traveling and you discount it by 10%, that's a $35 effective annual fee, and that's fine. If you end up using miles the way a lot of other people use it, then there's even more value. We'll get into a few examples later, but you'd value the miles at 2 cents per mile, and that's 200 in value for the anniversary bonus miles. In that case, even if you discount the up to 300 credit, the math should still work. As of filming, Capital One has more than 15 transfer partners. The main draw of this is transferring to partners that have fixed and competitive award charts. For example, transferring to Virgin Atlantic to book ANA Business or First Class, transferring to Qantas to book Finnair Business Class and other One World partners, also Singapore to book Singapore Business and First. For example, we flew to Japan 3 times in the last 16 months, and a lot of it being through ANA. ANA is a partner of Virgin Atlantic. You find space, transfer miles, and then call in to book. They operate based off an award chart, so from the West Coast, it's 52.5k miles for business and 72.5k miles for First. For Central and East Coast, it's 60k for business and 85k for First. But yeah, probably the best trans-Pacific flight option right now, given the hard product and also the cost in miles. If you're more of a domestic traveler, then Capital One lounges are a great perk, and they're currently in JFK, Las Vegas, Washington DCA, Washington IAD, Denver, and Dallas Fort Worth. Also, New York LGA is scheduled for arrival. The Venture X card also comes with a Priority Pass membership. Stateside, it's pretty mid. In Asia, though, it's pretty awesome. For example, whenever I go through Singapore, I'm always kind of amazed by the number of lounges, and most are pretty solid with food and drinks. If you do go, I try to Laksa, where some of them are 9 out of 10s. Also, massage chairs are pretty nice, and I wish we saw that in the US. Overall, I think this is one of the stronger setups. You have good multipliers and easy ones. they're not making you jump through hoops, and you still have transfer partners. You also have minimal downside risk, so let's say you try it, and if you don't like it, you can switch to a different setup afterwards. Credit cards are tools, and sometimes you switch it out for a different one that makes more sense. Capital One Savor though almost always makes sense though, given the no annual fee and the good multipliers. For the Venture X, we do have a calculator where we can run your numbers for your situation, that we can spot check that you actually get value. I'll link it down below, but should also pop up if you Google Venture X worth it ask Sabi. Also just made a new Capital One dual calculator as well, in case that's helpful. On that note, if you want to learn about cards, whether these ones or pretty much any other ones out there, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, asksabi.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the links are competitive, that they make sense for you, but otherwise it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you in advance. With all of this said, there are disadvantages. On the multiplier side, one big category that's missing is gas and EV charging. This isn't the biggest category by any means, but it can still be pretty high, upwards of 5K per year depending on car and what you do. The benefit of this though is that it is pretty easy to address. So pretty much get one of the other cards where gas and EV charging is the main focus and you're good to go. Also to be fair, Capital One isn't alone here. Most other issuers and their setups have the same hole. So not the biggest deal, but something to be aware of. One of the most controversial changes is lounge access, especially for guests. And to be fair, technically not effective until February 2026. One of the big reasons for this change is wait times to get into lounges, and it hasn't been good. So for whatever reason, Denver being one of the worst cases and oftentimes going 1 to up to 2 hours. On the top end, arguably making the perk useless. This new update should mean better access for people that actually have the card, but less good for families. It definitely is a balancing act though, so before there were 8 to 10 people going in with one card, and now those 10 spots might be 10 actual card members. Kinda curious what happens because lounge crowding is a pretty big issue with both Capital One and Priority Pass. Your mileage may vary depending on which camp you fall into. The last weak spot is transfer partners compared to some other bank programs. Again, you have 15 plus transfer partners here, but arguably weaker depending on what you're prioritizing and focused on. If you want a Capital One transfer partners cheat sheet, I'll have a link down below and send you an email. For hotels though, I completely agree. Hyatt is the de facto best pick given the value upside on both the mid and top end. Hilton can also surprisingly make sense when there is a transfer bonus and more so on the top end. For airlines though, it's fine, it's definitely not as bad as some people make it sound. One of the big arguments that people make is that they don't have any domestic partners like United. The thing though is that most domestic partners are not good. I love Delta, I fly Delta, and I have their status, but you pretty much have to wait for Delta One flash sales for it to be even viable. So for example, I'm sitting on a lot of Delta miles, and I wish there were more opportunities to use it, that way I could use the miles. The draw of miles is upside, and Delta is not great at being consistent with it. United is a bit better for maybe last minute ANA business class at 100k miles, but still not great. So for example, I'm sitting on a lot of United miles for that reason as well, and I wish the value was a bit higher. The only good domestic programs are Alaska as well as American, and neither are consistent transfer options by banks. Ironically, these are the miles that we end up buying when they have sales because it makes sense for us. For example, 160,000 Alaska miles for $2,956. 2,956 divided by 160k means that we're buying miles at 1.85 cents per mile. Not for everyone, but it makes sense if your hurdle rate is 2 cents per mile and if the retail is, let's say, 3 to 4 cents. As a filming, Alaska is great for Starlux to Taiwan, JAL when space pops up, and also short-haul domestic and a lot of other one-world options. American's great pretty broadly for one world. Back to Capital One, ironically, even if you do want to fly domestic, there are still options and ideally better ones. So for example, let's say you want to fly United, the best sweet spot for it is Turkish, which is a Capital One transfer partner. I'd argue that it's better than United's own program, but you do have to find availability. For transfers broadly, probably a step below, but it's not bad by any means, there's still a lot of good options. Overall, I think the setup has downsides, but it seems fair. Given the landscape, it seems like it's in a pretty good spot. Yes, if you live in a city and you use all the credits, then get the other cards. And arguably stack them, get let's say 6 to 8 of them because the math works out and it makes sense. For everyone else though, simplicity is key. The Capital One Dual offers upside, minimal hoop jumping, and a relatively fair annual fee. Again, if you are debating it, I'd run your numbers to make sure that the maths. If you want to learn about cards, whether these ones or ones from other issuers, you want to support the channel, we have links on the website, asksavor.com, and down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave a boxing glove emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. 3 questions. Number 1, what are your thoughts on the setup and how it compares to competitors? Number 2, what are your thoughts on the lounge changes? Are you a fan or not really? Also kind of curious if you think it was a necessary change, given that people were bringing in the whole extended family. Number 3, what are your thoughts on the transfer partners and what's your go-to option? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favor, thumbs up, share this, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time.